Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor P. Bhaskar Reddy, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. In the previous module, we have started to discuss the theme National Movement. In that, we covered the national movement from its inception up to the suspension of Swadeshi and Vande-matra movements. In this present module, you are going to learn about the Home Rule movement and its contribution for the progress of national movement after the suspension of Swadeshi and Vande-matra movement. The objectives of the study are the aim and importance of the Home Rule movement, the circumstances that led to start the Home Rule movements by Tilak and Annie Besant, the objectives of the Home Rule Leagues and its progress, their legacy and contribution to the national movement up to the beginning of the Gandhi era. With these objectives, let us start our discussion. What are the main aim of the Home Rule movement and its objectives? First, then we can discuss the other things. With the annulment of the partition of Bengal in the year 1911, there was no organized anti-British movement till the launching of the Home Rule movement. The Home Rule movement was carried after its beginning on vigorously during the years 1915 to 1917. The movement had brought a new life in the national movement with the aim of attainment of self-government for India within the British Empire by all constitutional means. With this aim, the Home Rule movement was started by Tilak and Annie Besant, but its aim was not complete Swaraj but Home Rule or internal self-government. It was not carried under the auspices of the National Congress but under the aegis of the Home Rule Leagues. Two Home Rule Leagues were established in this period, one by Balagangadhar Tilak at Pune in April 1916 and other by Annie Besant at Madras in September 1916. What circumstances paved the way for the starting of these Home Rule Leagues by Tilak and Annie Besant, and what are the developments that took place in the national movement after the suspension of Swadeshi movement and up to the starting of Home Rule League movement? It is also essential to know. These factors are the important factors contributed for the starting of Home Rule League. Several circumstances paved the way for starting Home Rule movement. The Minto-Morley reforms of 1909 failed to satisfy the aspiration of nationalists. In the meanwhile, in the world affairs are concerned, the First World War was broken out in August 1914. In the World War involving mutual struggle between the imperialist powers of Europe, they destroyed the myth of the racial superiority of Western nations. When it became necessary for the Britain in the First World War to depend on her colonies to face the First World War, the Queen made vague promises to the Indians. Accordingly, she gave so many promises to the Indians to solve their demands. Believing the promises, the Indians rallied around the British in the hour of crisis. In persuasion of that promises, the reforms of Indian Council Act, Minto-Morley, incorporated the concept of a representative government. Indians were expecting the responsible government. Consequently, the war years were years of intense national political agitation in India. Many Indian leaders saw clearly that the government was not likely to give any real concessions unless popular pressure was brought to bear upon it. It was at this stage that Home Rule idea was introduced by Annie Besant, the Irish lady, who already started the Theosophical Society for the social awakening in India. On the request of Annie Besant, the annual session of the Indian Congress 1915, they allowed the extremists to rejoin in the Congress. Thus, Annie Besant floated the idea of a Home Rule League movement, and also she tried for the unification of various groups within the Congressism who are divided as moderates and extremists. However, Annie Besant could not succeed in getting the support of the Congress and the Muslim League to set up the Home Rule Leagues. Meanwhile, when the things are going like this and the Annie Besant floated the idea of a Home Rule League, Balagangadhar Tilak, who was labeled as an extremist, already he was working for the progress of nationalism. He founded the Home Rule League on 23rd April 1916 at Pune and declared that Swaraj is my birthright and I will have it. This was the inspiration for the progress of the national movement further after the establishment of Home Rule League by Tilak. However, Annie Besant was disheartened. She persuaded the Congress to commit itself to a program of educative propaganda and to a revival of the local level Congress committees to work together for the progress of national movement. When there was no signs of any Congress activity, Annie Besant, an English admirer of Indian culture and the Indian people, announced the formation of her Home Rule League in September 1916 with headquarters at Adayar in Madras, with herself as president, George Arundale as the organizing secretary, C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer as one of the general secretaries, B.P. Wadia as the treasurer. Thus, in the year 1916, it witnessed two Home Rule Leagues, one started by Tilak and other started by Annie Besant. However, the objectives, concept and principles are the same, and their main motto is to get self-government to the net or Swaraj. The two leagues, however, cooperated with each other as well with the Congress and the Muslim League in putting their demands for Home Rule. The two leagues made rapid progress and the cry of Home Rule resounded throughout the length and breadth of India within a short period. While Tilak's movement concentrated on Maharashtra, Annie Besant movement covered the rest of the country. When the Home Rule movement gaining status and progress, many moderate nationalists who were dissatisfied with the Congress inactivity joined the Home Rule agitation. This further strengthened the Home Rule movement and the progress of the national movement. With this discussion on the circumstances that led to the progress of the national movement and the establishment of Home Rule Leagues by Tilak and Annie Besant, now we may shift our discussion. What is the contribution made by Annie Besant, not only in starting the Home Rule League movement and how he propagated the ideals, objectives, the course of the Home Rule League and further progress. In this regard, the Theosophical Society under Annie Besant played an important role in preparing the ground for the Home Rule movement as also in the national movement. The Besant movement was more popular in Madras Presidency than the other. Annie Besant Home Rule League had established to carry out the following objectives: to secure home rule for India by a law-abiding and constitutional equity, to maintain the connection with Great Britain by becoming a free nation within the British Empire under the imperial crown, and to support and strengthen the National Congress, which had labored for 30 years to lay the foundation of Indian self-government. Further, to carry on a continuous educational propaganda on the necessity of Home Rule movement. In fact, Home Rule means the government of the people and by the people. To achieve these aims and objectives and the self-government, she launched two newspapers titled New India and Commonwealth. Through these papers, she propagated the ideology, objectives of the Home Rule League and its necessity. She also organized public meetings and conferences and founded All India Home Rule League to make it a nationwide program. She also followed tactics like wide newspaper and periodical publicity, mass meetings, tours, posters, pamphlets, petitions, distribution of large quantities of literature, and local organizations. In this regard, the press also played a vital role in the propagation of the movement. Thus, the movement spread all over the country. Anne Besant conducted vigorous tours and addressed public meetings in various parts of the country, even at district levels. In her meetings, she inspired the people with eloquent and inspiring quotations. Anne Besant, particularly in her stirring and eloquent address in Andhra at Chittoor District Association, held on 18th March 1916, she concluded her address with the words, "To live without freedom is to die daily. It is not life, but living death." Anne Besant organized a band of Home Rule volunteers called the Order of the Sons of India and the Indian Boy Scout movement. With the organization of these type of volunteers, Anne Besant and her followers acquired a hold on the younger generation. She had also started the National Educational Scheme for the promotion of educational activity. Thus, the Home Rule movement reached the highest watermark with her speeches, tours, and also publications in the year 1917. The increasing popularity of this movement soon attracted the government wrath. As Anne Besant was writing articles advocating on self-rule for India and denouncing the government policies, several actions were taken against her under the Press Act. Even the fines and penalties were also imposed. In spite of this kind of punishment, the agitation started by Anne Besant continued to gain strength. There was a criticism of government's policy of circulating freedom of expression. Even in this crisis also, Anne Besant wrote two notable books. They are How India Wrought for Freedom, India a Nation. Thus, Anne Besant propagated the idea of Home Rule movement through various methods, and she conducted tours and inspired the people to join in the national movement. The important feature of the movement is the student and young participation. Students became the backbone of several of the League protest movements. The government, to suppress the entry of the students in these agitations, passed orders prohibiting students from attending public meetings and political agitations. Meetings were held everywhere to condemn the law. Government suspended the students who defied their orders and got involved. The suspended students were also intimidated that their readmission would not be permitted unless their parents guaranteed their good conduct to regain once again in the college or institution. When this type of suppressing measures are going on, as a counterblast, Anne Besant labored successfully to start a national college at Calcutta. Besides the starting of National University at Calcutta, in Madras province, the Madanapalli in Andhra became the nerve center of her educational activity. Her society started the Besant Theosophical College in the same year 1915 and also Rishi Valley School. By this, thus Madanapalli in Andhra Pradesh not only became a center of education and also it became the center of political activities to carry the Home Rule movement started by Anne Besant. The important of this Madanapalli is the Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet laureate, also visited the Madanapalli. He paid a visit to Theosophical College, Madanapalli in the year 1919 and stayed up to March 2nd. During his stay, he translated the famous Bengali song Janagana Mana, that is now India's national anthem, to English as the morning song of India. It is known that the musical notes were composed for the national anthem by Margaret Cousins, the wife of the principal of the Besant College. When the Home Rule League movement was in great progress and it received the mandate from all sections of the society, and Besant also addressed so many letters to the then Council of the Britishers for the Home Rule or for self-government to India. In the year 1917, a memorandum was addressed to Great Britain and containing the wrongs done to India and her determination to win Swaraj for the India. At the same time, while Besant touring all over the country, when she entered into the Bombay Presidency and later in the United Provinces against the defense of Indian rules, intensified the movement further. While she was touring in the northern provinces, Anne Besant and her two Theosophist associates B.P. Wadia and George Arundale were arrested on 16th June 1917 and confined in a house at Ooty for 93 days. The arrest of Anne Besant created an exploitative situation in country. Several meetings were held condemning the action of the government. Even the protesters collected Besant fund to run the movement in her absence. This was an important thing. Even the absence of Besant, the people extended their cooperation and further strengthened the movement. As there was tremendous pressure from the Indian public on the British government, Anne Besant and her lieutenants were released on September 17, 1917. While she was released from jail, she was given tumultuous welcome in Madras, Calcutta, Allahabad and Bombay. Several processions and celebration meetings were conducted in all parts of the country. Later, she was also elected as President of the National Congress in the Calcutta session held in December 1917. When the Home Rule movement was in peak, the government of British also had a thought of extending some provisions to the Indians in the constitutional rights. Thus, Montague claims for reforms were introduced. To intensify the Home Rule League agitation, the British government announced Montague claims for reforms in July 1918, by which the establishment of responsible government was the goal of British policy in India, and assured that steps would be taken in this direction as early as possible. When the Montague Chelmsford reforms were announced, the Indian national leaders were happy and they thought that they are going to get their self-government. However, the dissensions were broke out among the leaders of the country, particularly the rival parties. The supporters of the non-Brahmin political association, namely Justice Party, pointed out that large sections of the people were not yet prepared to undertake political responsibility and even sought official support for the movement. Anne Besant severely criticized such leaders of the non-Brahmin organizations. At that time, the government, having the thought of utilizing the dissensions, they offered constitutional concerns and followed the policy of divide and rule. Thus, the Montague Chelmsford reforms was followed by another announcement to associate non-Brahmin and other communities in administration. So far, we discussed about the Home Rule League movement, its objectives, its course, and the role of Tilak and Anne Besant. It is known that Home Rule movement received great impetus among all sections of the society. What it left on the legacy of the Indian movement and how it contributed for the further carrying of national movement up to the entry of Gandhi, it is essential to assess. This Home Rule movement consolidated the forces of nationalism in the country and created a generation of ardent nationalists who formed the backbone of the national movement in the coming years. It played a harmonizing role in bringing together the divergent trends like the moderates and the extremists within the Congress. The Congress and the Muslim League were get together, rallying of all sections of the society behind the slogan of Home Rule. It is an important contribution made by the Home Rule movement. Besides the above, for the first time, from the organizational point of view, it established links between the urban centers with the All India movement. The methods employed to popularize and carry the message to ever larger number of people were mainly involved in propagating through the newspapers and periodical publicity, public meetings and pamphlets. However, by popularizing the idea of home rule or self-government and making it a common thing, it generated widespread pro-nationalist atmosphere in the country. With this legacy and objectives created by the Home Rule movement, now we may discuss about the end of Home Rule movement, how the Home Rule movement was suspended. With the First World War, which came to an end on November 11th, 1918, the principle of self-determination of all nations proclaimed by President Wilson of US, which caught the imagination of the people all over the world. At that time, the Indian political leaders became very anxious to know how far England would be prepared to extend the principle of self-determination in India. They even thought of sending an Indian delegation to the Paris Peace Conference with a hope to gain greater political rights and in order to plead their case. The annual session of the Congress held in Delhi suggested modifications to the Minto Fort reforms and nominated the leaders like Tilak, Gandhi and Hassan Imam as representatives to peace conference. Thus, with the conclusion of the First World War, the Home Rule movement also may be said to have came to an end. Thus, so far, we have discussed the Home Rule movement, which started in the year 1915 and it continued for nearly 2 years. In this, there are several leaders, particularly Tilak, and the contribution of Besant is everlasting. They are the responsible persons to spread the movement as a mass movement in wider parts of India. In conclusion, thus Besant and Tilak introduced a new dimension to the Indian political activity. One of the achievements of this movement was that it gave some extent a mass base to the political struggle of India, and people developed a large amount of political consciousness. The end of the Home Rule movement was the starting point of another great phase in the history of freedom of India, that is Gandhian phase. With this discussion, I hope that you have understood the Home Rule movement and its significance and the contribution of the leaders for the propagation of ideals and how this movement propagated the ideals of self-government and its results. For more details, see the e-content and other component parts. Thank you.